you got to feel like you have a chance to win this one, I think, in a 12-5 matchup. And you're going to see a team that plays the exact same style, the exact same system that you do. So that part of the matchup should be pretty fun, too.
It should. You mentioned the styles, first of all. Styles make fights in this type of game. How much does the style of the way JMU and Kentucky play lend itself to the fact that I'm not saying they're going to pull the upset, but this could be a competitive one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it'll be interesting because they're not, carbon copy teams. I think, Kentucky has a lot more experience at the 5 position there, the post down low. So, what will you see JMU to counter that? Will they maybe go a little bit small with Ashanti Barnes at the 5, who normally plays the 4 for them? Will they shake things up a little bit? But, for the most part, it's 2 teams that want to run, 2 teams that, really focus on defense and rebounding. And, it's going to be talking to players and stuff last night. They like the idea that it's going to be like 2 teams that are going to try to do the same things, and it's just whoever does it better is going to win that game.
What value for the JMU Lady Dukes is there in terms of the location of their regional? Sometimes you get shipped to these faraway places. They're in Morgantown, which, first of all, that creates a fun atmosphere. We can insert our West Virginia Mountaineer jokes here in the fast lane, but it's also within relative driving distance for West Virginia, JMU, and Kentucky fans. So you'd imagine the arena should be pretty full and create a cool atmosphere.
Yeah, and Miami of Ohio fans playing against West Virginia in the other game, they're pretty close too. But it should be a great atmosphere. I think, unfortunately, for JMU and Kentucky fans, those tickets went really fast. They might be a little tough to get your hands on, but I think we'll see a decent amount of JMU purple in the building. But, I mean, more than that, it's the fact that they don't have to play West Virginia in the first round is huge. To get an actual neutral court game in the first round, I think that's what probably gives them a real shot to win. It's really tough to win a true road game in the NCAA tournament.
Shane, we're going to wrap it up on this. It was appropriate. This came on Friday the 13th. JMU and the Sun Belt have announced their schedule for 2026 for football. The only thing is, it looks a lot like some of the schedules for Conference USA and the Liberty Flames because of Louisiana Tech appearing on both of those schedules. Should I put one of those into my calendar as being more likely, or should I wait until we get closer to the date and then actually have an idea of which schedule actually matters?
Well, I mean, this happened a few years ago with Marshall and ODU and Southern Miss when they were leaving Conference USA, and both leagues put them on their schedules, and they wound up playing a Sun Belt schedule that year. I think the same thing will happen. It's just going to be a matter of how much it ends up costing Louisiana Tech to get to the Sun Belt a year ahead of schedule.
So you're saying I should put the Duke schedule into the calendar and hold off on the Liberty Flames ones, at least some of those games, until this thing gets settled. I'll read into it as we need to, Shane. We'll read your analysis at Shane_DNR Sports on Twitter and DNRonline.com. Thank you for sharing some of it for us today in the Fast Lane on the VTRN Sports app and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube.
All right, thanks, Ed.
Now to the Virginia Cavaliers.
With someone who had the privilege of seeing our own TJ Wilkerson. He had the pain of seeing me a couple of weeks ago, but privilege down in Charlotte for the ACC tournament. Jerry Ratcliffe with us here in the Fast Lane. Hootie, great to be speaking with you. We touched earlier on the fact that the Virginia Cavaliers, you don't want to celebrate all the moral victories, but it looked like a team that showed a level of progress against Duke compared to what they showed for you, TJ, and others down in Cameron a couple of weeks earlier. Is that something that should give fans of Virginia optimism as they get ready to listen to them in March Madness on the VTRN Sports app?
I shared a couple of shuttle rides with TJ down there. Yeah, I think it should give not only the fans some confidence, but should inspire the team, because I think they learned a lot in getting their doors blown off at Cameron a few weeks ago, and figured out exactly what they needed to do to try to play these guys a closer game, and essentially took them to the wire with everything on the line. So I think they walked out of the Spectrum Center thinking that they can play with just about anybody in the country. And even John Shire said, the media and the fans in the ACC knows how good Virginia is, but nationally, I don't think people know, and I think they're about to find out.
Yes, they probably will. Meanwhile, Duke was playing without a couple of injured players, most notably Patrick Ngamba, who was one of them, and Caleb Foster was the other. Because of those injuries, do you ding what Virginia did at all, or is this still impressive? Because obviously Duke was most notably playing the most talented version of the freshmen and players they have, freshman of the year and probably college basketball player of the year, Cameron Boozer.
It probably takes a little bit of the shine off of it, but, Grunlow was essentially playing one-handed himself, the Virginia center, and he passed up a couple of shots he would normally take just because he couldn't use that hand to shoot. And even though Ugo set a record for 21 blocked shots in 3 nights, he was on the stationary bike and had a back brace on every time he came to the bench. So I don't think Virginia was 100% either, but still, I think they walked away knowing that they can play really good basketball against really good talent. Meanwhile,
they'll play Wright State in their first game Friday afternoon. You'll hear it until it becomes a blowout, at least, on the VTRN Sports app. Your assessment of that matchup and their overall draw, does it set up favorably for the Wahoos to make some noise and maybe playing even in the second week of the NCAA tournament?
Well, it does, but you gotta remember Virginia hasn't won an NCAA tournament game since 2019, so they've experienced a lot of upsets in the past. This team should be different, though. I think this team is really built for postseason play. They've got a lot of older players, 22, 23-year-olds. They've got shooters. They've got size and rim protectors, a maturity about them that most college basketball teams don't possess. So they should, maybe first half it might not be a runaway, but I expect that it will be before the game is over.
Well, we'll find out when it comes their way, of course, on the VTRN Sports app, and our listeners will know it's a blowout because we'll shift away from that one to other games. Meanwhile, Lady Wahoos step in the right direction to make the tournament. I know they're in the playing game, but do they get a justifiable seed, and is this a step forward for a program that has invested more resources and needed to get at least to this point?
Yeah, I think that's something they needed to do is make the postseason, and they were able to do so. They probably should have won that first round ACC tournament game against Clemson, which would have gotten rid of any doubt. But they still squeezed in, and they have a chance to do something in that first 4 game against Arizona State. It's been a long time since they've been in the tournament, so if they can get past the first one and maybe make a little bit more noise, it should help them going forward, particularly in recruiting.
No doubt about it. It should. We will have more to discuss on the Lady Hoos as their tournament outlook progresses as well. And you can keep up with it all at jerryratcliffe.com. It's well worth your subscription for premium Virginia Cavalier coverage. Hootie, thank you for your time today in the Fast Lane.
Thank you, Ed. Great talking to you. See you soon.
Now to Just For You Haters, left hand up the Commanders.
Madam President. I feel like we need to get like some presidential music that comes in for Candy Waller of Bowie TV Sports, who is with us here in the Fast Lane. Seawall, we last spoke about a week ago, but the Washington Commanders, they haven't stopped since we last spoke. They made a number of free agent signings, the majority of them outside of tight end Chiga Okonkwo and then bringing back running back Jerry McNichols. We're not counting the re-signings of Mariota and Tunsil in this. Majority of their additions are on the defensive end. Is that one of your big takeaways, that for the Commanders, they were going to always spend more, and they certainly have?
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the things that we talked about last week. I said, hey, it's just the top of the week. Free agency is a long period of time. So they absolutely have seemed to have spent their money quite wisely, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They've been able to get a few pieces back. I'm sure that fans were happy to hear about left guard Chris Paul re-signing. They're bringing De'Ami Brown back. You've already mentioned Jeremy McNichols, but they for sure have made some moves all throughout last week and continue to make moves. So it has been a really, really good free agency for the Washington Commanders.
All right, we touched on Laremy Tunsil last week. We're not going to count that. Offensive side of the ball, the other moves. They've re-signed Chris Paul, the left guard. They've re-signed quarterback Marcus Mariota. They brought back Jeremy McNichols. He's back in Washington as a running back. And then Chig Okonkwo, the tight end, who was signed to the 3-year, $27 million deal as part of the flurry of free agent activity over the first week. Which of those do you like the most and why?
I mean, Chris Paul. Honestly, bringing back Chris Paul, I think that was very important. With them not knowing what to do or what they had, I don't want to say they don't know what to do, but they released Tyler Biadasz, right? As a center, that became kind of a shock, a wow thing, right? We know that they were in on Tyler Linderbaum, but Tyler Linderbaum, rightfully so, went to the highest bidder, the Las Vegas Raiders. So they're without a center right now, right? And when you look at the free agency options, not real sure what's out there. Yes, Nick Allegretti can play center, but there are some good centers in the draft. I think that with the extension of Laremy Tunsil, bringing back Chris Paul was going to be key. Also, the move at tight end, I thought that was great. I mentioned De'Ami Brown, bringing him back, Rashad White at running back, and what they've done with bringing back Jeremy McNichols and adding Jerome Ford and Rashad White. I think those are all promising. They made a lot of moves, but I'm still going to go with re-signing left guard Chris Paul.
Look, I love that because the O-line and D-line are not spots that get a lot of attention except at the Virginia Talk Radio Network because our very own Ty Tracy from the morning warm-up, 7 to 8 a.m., right here on VTRN Sports. He is a former trench player himself. Granted, it was just at Virginia Union and before that at Heritage High School in our backyard. So we go to defense. Ty's spot. Defense. We know about Odafe Owe. We touched on that last week. The rest of the defensive signings on the line, Tim Settle and Kaylavon Chason. The second level, Leo Chenal, the linebacker. And then in the backfield, Amik Robertson and Nick Cross. Out of that grouping, which one do you like the most? We don't get to count Odafe Owe because we touched on that already.
I mean, is it going to be fair for me to say Nick Cross because he's from Bowie, Maryland?
I mean, that's allowed. That's allowed.
Nick Cross is from Bowie, Maryland. But I'm going to go back with someone that they brought back, Tim Settle. I think that was such a surprise, but really sneaky good signing in Tim Settle because the fan base is familiar with Tim Settle. We saw what he could potentially do, but then him was going to the Buffalo Bills and then on that high-powered Texans defense last year with him coming back and understanding that this team really gets how important that side of the ball really needs to be beefed up. I'm really excited about Tim Settle coming back.
Seawall, we've not had a chance to broach this because it kind of was starting to unfold last week, but we now know what's going on up in Baltimore with Max Crosby. They backed out of that deal. They instead keep their draft picks, and they basically comp it up by signing Trey Hendrickson. Bigger picture ramifications. What's the reaction around not just the Ravens to that move, but you cover the Commanders and folks around there. Is there varying reactions? Is it just cold, hard business and everyone's cool with it? How has this been received from Ravens folks, but also outside the flock?
I mean, I think it's just some of those things that happen. I mean, knowing that the Ravens were looking at having both Max Crosby and Trey Hendrickson on their defensive line is like, wow, they were really going to do that. And yes, they were. So that's something. But you know what? If Max Crosby's injury was just something that they were not looking to bring on or deal with to give up those 2 first-round picks, while it might look a little bad, maybe on the outside, hey, listen, business is business. They said, hey, we're not willing to take that risk now that he did not pass that physical, and they want their first rounders back, which was smart on them. I mean, it would have been great, but it sounded like it could have been more harm than good bringing Max Crosby in.
Good stuff.
And losing those 2 first rounders as well. That's big.
Great stuff from Candy Waller, Bowie TV Sports president. She is so kind to just pronounce it without correcting us all these years. Bowie TV Sports president. She is Madam President, and we appreciate her time. Seawall, thank you for joining us today in the Fast Lane.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'll be talking to you guys again soon.
It's our pleasure. Seawall with us here in the Fast Lane to wrap up part 1 of covering the Commonwealth. When we return in part 2, Chesterfield's own from Virginia, Denny Hamlin, passing Kevin Harvick on the all-time NASCAR wins list. He might even be able to get to Kyle Busch pretty soon. He was largely the dominant car at Vegas yesterday, and we will recap that, plus all the thoughts on the Virginia Tech Hokies opting out of the NIT with David Cunningham still to come on the VTRN Sports app and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube.
Mark Dalton here with Terry Volkswagen. Get ready to fall head over heels for the perfect VW SUV. One size doesn't fit all, though, and that's why Volkswagen has an SUV for everyone. From the compact and affordable Volkswagen Taos to the tech-packed Tiguan and the spacious Volkswagen Atlas. No matter which one fits your lifestyle, you'll love the comfort, performance, and safety. Stop by Terry Volkswagen on Forest Road in Lynchburg or check us out online at terryvw.com. Terry Volkswagen. You'll love our cars.
Commercial turf is your business. Supporting it is ours. At Miller Built Outdoor Equipment in Lynchburg, we're focused on professional turf equipment, Toro commercial zero turns, professional handhelds, fleet planning, and service support built for uptime. Whether you're running 2 mowers or 20, we help you build the right setup from day one. Built around your turf, Miller Built Outdoor Equipment on 12th Street in Lynchburg.
Hey, small to medium business owners, if you're frustrated with slow IT support, high costs, or paying for services you just don't use, it's time for a change. Hi, I'm Colt with We Fix Stupid Computers. We provide reliable on-site and remote support tailored for businesses just like yours. And we go beyond just fixing problems. We empower your staff with real technology so they can work smarter every day. From repairs to training to full IT support, we save you time, stress, and money. Call We Fix Stupid Computers, 434-525-8590, where smart support meets real savings.
We're joined by Randy Trost with Trost Law. Randy, unfortunately, you guys seem to be seeing a lot of people that are driving without insurance and then impacting other motorists. What have you guys noticed, and what do people need to know to protect themselves?
We are seeing clients come into our office being injured by motorists without insurance. And the most important thing that a person can do to protect themselves against these uninsured motorists or underinsured motorists is to make sure their own uninsured, underinsured coverage matches their liability coverage for their insurance policy on their car, and make sure they have more than the minimum liability coverage limits and uninsured, underinsured motorist liability coverage limits.
Randy Trost with Trost Law discussing how you can protect yourself from uninsured or underinsured motorists. When people are considering their policies, do you have any do's or don'ts to make sure they have a strong policy?
I recommend getting a minimum of $100,000 single event liability insurance policy and making sure that your uninsured, underinsured liability limits are matching that $100,000 liability policy.
Randy, thank you for sharing that info with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
For more about how Trost Law can help you if you've been hurt, trostlaw.com, 434-777-HURT.
When the thrill of playing ball turns into the agony of a broken windshield or car window, contact Apple Auto Glass. Your local auto glass repair shop on Allegheny Avenue in Lynchburg. Apple Auto Glass provide a professional assessment with the honesty from your neighbors, so you can get back to sharing the great moments this season.
Hi, I'm Susan Lane, Ed's mom. March Madness brings lots of picks, but I have only one, Bartlett Tree Experts. I rely on Bartlett to professionally assess my oaks and boxwoods and to prepare a maintenance plan within my budget. Call Corey, a certified arborist, at Bartlett Tree Experts or go to bartlett.com.
Do you love the 80s? Whether you were Team Madonna or Prince, this night is for you. Hi, I'm Kelly Diaz with Casa of Central Virginia, inviting you to Retro Rewind, our totally rad 80s party for a great cause. Join us April 11th from 6 to 10 at the Boonesboro Ruritan Club for an awesome 80s DJ, arcade games, dance floor, and more. Best of all, every ticket helps CASA volunteers advocate for children who have experienced abuse or neglect in our community. Grab your friends, moonwalk over to cvcasa.org, and get your tickets before they're gone.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
From Lady Gaga to whatever this music is here for covering the Commonwealth.
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth, a look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with NASCAR.
With Kevin Nix of FrontStretch.com, who is with us here in the Fast Lane. Kevin, Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, and Denny Hamlin were the three top cars at Las Vegas this weekend. Would it have been that divided evenly if Denny Hamlin did not have the speeding penalty when he was at front early in the race and had to work his way back through the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Denny would have dominated had he not had that penalty. I think it was pretty apparent as soon as he got the penalty that he had the best car, just how quickly and effortlessly he went through the field, where Bell and Larson, they were decent. Obviously, Elliott was good there at the end, but I don't think anyone had any match for Denny yesterday, especially when he got back to the front.
What does it say about not just Denny Hamlin, but Toyota as well? This is a track where Chevrolet's had success. Chase Elliott tried to run him down. Kyle Larson has run very well here at Vegas, but yet it was Toyota that put Denny Hamlin near the front. Christopher Bell was up there. My guy, Ty Gibbs, more on him in a moment. All of them were near the front, and not to mention Chase Briscoe raced his way back in, and even Bubba Wallace had another strong day.
Yeah, this was a dominant day by Toyota, more or less across the board. They started at the front. Even with the penalties, they drove back quickly through the field. Gibbs had all four of his cars finish in the top 8 positions. So it was a tale of resiliency plus domination. I think both of those together, definitely something that Toyota, the manufacturer, can be very proud of.
You know, I know you were with our guy, Brian Nolan, and I'm glad to hear that you survived, and both of y'all have communicated with us today in the Fast Lane. Never a guarantee after a trip out to Las Vegas. Did Brian fill you in on how legendary Ty Gibbs is for us here in the Fast Lane?
Yeah, Nolan told me that he selected Ty Gibbs to win the race. But I got news. I actually did pick Denny, so I one-upped him just a little bit. But no, it was Ty Gibbs had a really strong performance. In that first stage, I thought he might have had a shot to win the way he was going. And he faded a little bit later, but Gibbs has obviously a lot of off-track stuff involving him lately, but he's been very strong lately on the track. I was very impressed.
Was he looking, and has he looked like a driver that has turned the corner and at some point is poised to break out and make me lose my bet that he will not, emotional hedge, of course, from back before I gave it up for Lent, but that he will not win a race this year?
I think if he continues at the rate he's going, it's possible he could win. Like he's had race winning speed a couple times. I think he needed to be a little stronger at Vegas to contend. He was just a notch below where Denny was, for example. But this is the strongest start he has had in his career, I think, in the Cup Series. And I think a win could happen. I'm not one to say where, but I think we'll see him in victory lane sooner rather than later.
Well, I'm going to say a quick little prayer here for this. Let it be at Martinsville when Trey Lyle is down there and Michael Massey, and they have to endure me watching Ty Gibbs go to victory lane. It would be unbearable for them. So it would be absolutely awesome if it takes place right there. Kevin, your insight was awesome today in the Fast Lane and on the Stock Car Scoop podcast from the Front Stretch Network. Thank you for joining us in the Fast Lane.
Oh, no problem. It was a pleasure having me on. Thank you, guys.
And last but not least, or maybe least, the Virginia Tech Hokies.
David Cunningham of TechSideline.com is with us here in the Fast Lane. He's at the Real D-Cunna on Twitter and Instagram. David, it's happened. Virginia Tech men's basketball team opting out of the NIT. Provide perspective. Look, I didn't go to Tech. I didn't go to a school. I went to a small school that doesn't really have, it's a D3 school. So we don't have sports on this level. Why is there frustration amongst Virginia Tech fans when the idea of opting out of non-meaningful tournaments seems to be the norm in revenue-generating sports and college athletics?
Yeah, it's become the norm, and I think that frustrates a lot of people who, especially now, are giving money to these programs. We have turned this into a pay-for-play sport. Not that it was not already, but college athletics instead of money being exchanged under the table now, schools are paying their own players, and fans are being asked to pay their own players. And as a result, I think there's frustration within the fan base, because when you want to invest in a program, you expect them to play all the games. You expect them to represent your university at the highest level and do so with class, but also play every game that is in front of them. And I think I could understand why some of the Virginia Tech players might not have wanted to play, whether or not it's professional aspirations in terms of a guy like Toby Lawal or Neoclis Abdallah, guys who are hoping to go play pro probably. But at the same time, guys being beat up with injuries, I get that. But I think it's become so much less about playing basketball, playing sports with your teammates than it has, hey, this is kind of what our individual decisions are, and we're all kind of going to go our separate ways now. And, you didn't used to see this, and it's become more frequent lately. And I agree. Chris Coleman, my colleague, wrote a pretty good column about it, I thought, where, it's not necessarily about the NIT. And even when it's football, it's not necessarily about bowl games, but it's about the principle. And it's showing up for the fans who have supported you all year, and the fans that in some ways are paying your salary. And I think that's where a lot of fans get very frustrated, because it's been a disappointing year. But you still have a chance to go and make it right. Well, not if you end the season and don't play. And I think there are a lot of fans that feel like maybe they're not getting their money's worth as a result.
Is this likely to change opt-outs of bowl games in the NIT at Virginia Tech and other places? Or is this just the reality in the NIL culture where it's a, quote, got to get mine, end quote, attitude?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Every situation's different, Ed. You look at Florida State. The Seminoles, under Luke Lauck's first-year head coach, decided to opt out and not go to the NIT. I was a little bit surprised given how well the Noles played down the stretch, but everyone has their own reasoning. And I think that's the tough part. It's difficult to compare Virginia Tech to a school like Belmont, which just lost its head coach to Kansas State. Different situation. Obviously, they opted out too. But I think in this world where it has become driven by players and paying student athletes, you're in this weird spot. I thought Malcolm Delaney, Virginia Tech's point guard, back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, tweeted something the other day about it, where he said, in my senior season, I did not want to play in the NIT. We were disappointed we missed the NCAA tournament, but we went in Seth Greenberg's office and he told us that it was bigger than us. It's bigger than the program. It's the fans. It's all the people who have supported us. And there are people that are coming after us, that it's bigger than us. And, he said he didn't want to play, but he played anyway, and, was kind of happy he did, even though he didn't really want to be there. He understood that there was a bigger picture at play. And I think that's what's sometimes lost in the, I don't want to say selfishness, but lost in the individual aspect that the sports have now become a little bit at the collegiate level, where some players are only looking out after themselves. I think it has become more professional in that aspect. And, I tell you what, like, you're not going to see, you don't see professional teams opting out of stuff. Like, that just doesn't really happen. You play the games in front of you because you're being paid to do so. But college athletics is kind of in this weird middle ground, if that makes sense.
Chris Coleman's article is fantastic. That alone is worth your subscription to TechSideline.com, as their managing editor, David Cunningham, is with us here in the Fast Lane, and y'all discussed it as well on the latest TSL podcast that dropped earlier today. David Teal played the soundbite, put it up at by David Teal on Twitter, and obviously you'll probably ask him about this on your Talking with Teal podcast later this week on the Tech Sideline Podcast Network, about Mike Young 2 years ago never wanting to opt out of the NIT. What changed? The game, as far as how the game of college basketball is played?
Well, Ed, it's funny you say that. I just mentioned Malcolm Delaney. We talked about this on our podcast earlier today. I'm sure, along with Delaney, that over the last dozen years, there have been many players, not just at Virginia Tech, but across the country. People who didn't want to play in games, not just basketball, but football, whatever, right? You name it. Everybody's got their own unique vantage point and mentality and thought about how to approach games and whether or not they even want to be there. But the sport has changed so much from a perspective of monetary value, where players are essentially getting a salary to play, yet they're still not treated as athletes. As far as the NIT goes, I don't feel like this was a decision where Mike Young was just like, hey, we're leaving it up to the players. I'm sure there was some say from the coaching staff and whatnot. But at the same time, you get to this spot where you've got a bunch of guys banged up, another bunch of guys that are probably looking ahead to their future and to what's next after college. And if you feel like it's the best trajectory for your program, despite what the fans feel, maybe that's the route you take. It'll be interesting once we get a chance to talk to Mike Young about whenever that next might be, about what the difference was. Because 2 years ago, the Hokies played in that NIT. And I think they went 1-1, if I remember correctly. They beat Richmond, and then they went up to Ohio State and lost. I'm not sure why they opted out. What Mike Young would say, outside of what has already been said. But, coaches have to make what they think is the best decision for their program. And as we know in sports, sometimes the fans, the media, don't necessarily think it's the right one. And I think this is one where you're seeing a lot of backlash from the fans because of how connected they feel to this program and how they kind of feel let down in a lot of ways.
I know Mike Young, and you guys at TechSideline.com have reported this. Mike Young agreeing to a contract extension with Virginia Tech. He'll be back as their head coach next year. But is this an example of Mike Young maybe just lacking the energy to fight this and really take this on and set the standard of the program in the way that some of the others in college basketball, even with revenue share and NIL for athletes, are doing?
Yeah, that's I would love to have more insight from talking to Mike. And I really wish I knew kind of what was going through his mind. It's hard to answer that without knowing what kind of route he took to navigate this conversation. We were just told from a source that there was the team met on Friday and there was a vote because, of course, they had to let the NIT know by the end of the day on Friday whether or not it was going to be interested in playing in the tournament. And the vote was no, and they decided against it. I don't know what Mike Young's thought process was throughout the whole thing. You can, if he opened it up to players only, you can fault that there. But the bottom line is this, Ed. It is I would say it is probably a disappointing end to what has been a disappointing year. And had Virginia Tech made one more shot in one more game, whether it was SMU, Stanford, Wake Forest, either of the two times they lost, Virginia, Miami. I mean, you make one more basket in one of those games or get one more stop, we're not having this conversation. And I think that's the bigger picture here. It's, if the Hokies are in the NCAA tournament, they're certainly not opting out of that. But I think the frustration maybe boiled over within the program. And then this is me saying this without knowing what the actual feelings are in there. But I imagine that a lot of those people wanted to play. But at the same time, you have to, quote unquote, make the best decision for your program.
Couple more questions with David Cunningham of TechSideline.com. He's at the Real D. Connell. We are on W227BG, Timberlake, WBGM, AM Lynchburg, WMNA, Gretna, Danville, Southside, the VTRN Sports app, and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube. Does this at all contribute to the possibility that, I know football is its own deal, but that some of the fan passion may shift away towards other non-revenue sports? Women's basketball is in the tournament again, wrestling, they're ACC champions, and they really had a dominant year there. And series loss to Duke notwithstanding, softball is off to a good start as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, Ed. It'll be interesting to see what happens when football hopefully gets rolling again, because I think that will generate a lot of excitement. But think about just for a second what the Virginia Tech fan base has kind of been through over the last handful of months. You have a little bit of hope that you can do something in football, but you get off to a horrendous start, and after 3 games, you fire your coach. You win 3 games with an interim head coach in Philip Montgomery, and you end up spending 2+ months on a coaching search. And I think that took a lot out of the fan base. And yes, you get James Franklin, but there are no results. There are no games for football until this upcoming fall, right? You've got to have something else to tide you over. And you mentioned wrestling. Wrestling's been fantastic. Obviously, softball has been pretty good lately, but I think it's been a disappointing year for Virginia Tech athletics in a lot of aspects, particularly when, well, your number one sport, you have to fire a coach and hire a new one. And then in your second most popular sport, you have a down year in where, comparative to where the media thought Virginia Tech would be, well, it's about on par. Where Mike Young thought the Hokies would be, it is much, much, much more below. He thought he had an NCAA tournament team on his hands, and he said that multiple times earlier in the year. And I think you add that up, yes, obviously wrestling, softball, women's basketball, heading to the NCAA tournament, those teams are in really good spots. But I think Virginia Tech fans it just kind of boiled over a little bit, the frustration of having, your 2 major sports have really, really tough years. The Hokies, are one. I mean, obviously the women's basketball team was secure in the NCAA tournament, but, the Hokies only got one of their main 3 sports into the postseason. I think that's a little bit frustrating for a lot of the fans around here, especially at a time, Ed, when you are being asked as a fan to donate more and more and more money than you ever have before. It's become heavier on the fans, and when they don't get anything in return, particularly postseason guarantees, I think it boils over and becomes very, very frustrating. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when football hopefully turns a corner and gets back going again. But yes, I could see this impacting men's basketball long term, and particularly the donor pool. I have no idea what that group of people will feel like, but we won't really know, at least probably until the transfer portal opens.
No, we will not. Meanwhile, you mentioned football. That's where we'll wrap it up today with David Cunningham of TechSideline.com. David, this soundbite from James Franklin can be included in your answer to the question we're about to ask.
Quick statement. I take coaching too. So first of all, I just kind of want to thank a number of people, obviously, to get to this point.
He made the quick statement opening because people have mentioned he'll often have a long statement and long answers, and you get like 4 questions in. So it seems like he's trying to turn over a new leaf with the media. Is that the big takeaway from his press conference pre-spring practice today? Is there another one or two that you have? What stood out of James Franklin meeting with you and the other media members today, David?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. I'm kind of in women's basketball mode here. I'm headed to Texas this week, but I had to get some football in first. And we'll get to see my colleagues, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, will be at Virginia Tech's full open practice on Thursday morning, which is pretty exciting, about probably 2 hours at least of open practice. But I thought some of Franklin's comments were interesting. There's only so much you can take because it is pre-spring. I thought what he said about some of the injuries, Marcellus Hawkins right now, he's Tech's top running back coming back. He ran for almost 800 yards last year. He's dealing with something right now, so he has not really had a chance to be evaluated by new running backs coach Norval McKenzie. So they're dealing with some guys that are banged up right now, but they're healthy for the most part, it seems like. He made some comments on some individual guys, quarterback included, how they're going to rotate quarterbacks kind of in the spring ball. Obviously, Ethan Grunkemeyer is the guy that he has familiarity with coming from Penn State, but you don't want to kind of just give him the job. You want to create competition. So talking about that and cross-training both on the offensive line and on the defensive side of the ball at linebackers. A lot of little detailed stuff, not necessarily a whole overarching thing, but I'm sure as spring ball ramps up here, Hokies start practice tomorrow, we'll have a lot more info and have a lot more details.
It'll be at TechSideline.com. We'll be discussing it here as well in the Fast Lane, on Fast Lane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and your podcast feed, and, of course, the VTRN Sports app, your home for all of March Madness. David, thank you for your time today in the Fast Lane. We're grateful for it, and we appreciate it. Good luck with this other version of crossover season.
I appreciate it, Ed. Talk to you soon.
David Cunningham from TextSideline.com, their managing editor, with us in the fast lane as we go a little bit long today. We will get ready for NBA basketball, 6:30 tonight. Magic Hawks. There's no Magic City night in Atlanta. That got nixed, but we will get to bring you the coverage, and you might as well just listen on the VTRN Sports app since all the extracurriculars from the Magic City Strip Club have been taken off the docket for this evening, thanks to Commissioner Adam Silver of the NBA. So you can just listen instead, and we'll be reacting to all the action and March Madness in particular tomorrow in the fast lane. So join us 5 to 6 p.m. VTRN Sports app and 93.3 FM.
Okay, so tell me what you said because you're dancing too much.
You really are.
I didn't.
I
Renee,
didn't think I
you
danced.
dancing.
I said they were going to win in 2026. That's what I said.
Okay.
That's what my gut tells me. I think that this could